The rifle kicked against Amelia Abbott's shoulder with a satisfying recoil, and the glass bottle exploded into glittering shards 200 yards downrange, bringing the crowd to stunned silence before a single pair of hands began to clap somewhere behind her. It was November 1876 in Canon City, Colorado, and Amelia had just won the annual Thanksgiving turkey shoot against 40 men who had lined up confident they would walk away with the prize bird. She lowered her Winchester repeater, blew a strand of auburn hair from her eyes, and turned to face the assembled townsfolk. Most of the men stood slack-jawed, their own rifles hanging uselessly at their sides. A few muttered among themselves, faces reddened with embarrassment. But through the murmuring crowd, she heard it clearly, the steady rhythmic applause that refused to fade, even as everyone else remained frozen. She followed the sound with her green eyes until they landed on him. He stood at the back of the gathering, a mountain of a man who looked like he had walked straight down from the Sangre de Cristo range that towered to the west. He was easily 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the autumn sun. Dark hair fell past his collar, slightly wild but clean, framing a face that was all hard angles and weathered bronze skin. His arms, visible where his sleeves were rolled to his elbows, were corded with muscle that flexed as he continued to clap. Unlike the other men who wore store-bought clothes and polished boots, this man was dressed in buckskin and wool, practical clothing that spoke of long winters spent in high country. Their eyes met across the distance, and something in Amelia's chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the shooting competition. His eyes were a startling blue-gray, like storm clouds over mountain peaks, and they held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. A slow smile spread across his bearded face, genuine and warm, completely at odds with the sour expression surrounding him. "Well, I will be damned," one of the competitors finally said, breaking the spell. "A woman beat every last one of us." The crowd began to stir, some men offering grudging congratulations, while others turned away without a word. The mayor, a portly man named Henderson, stepped forward with the prize turkey slung over his shoulder and an uncomfortable expression on his face. "Miss Abbott," he said stiffly, "congratulations on your, unexpected victory. Your turkey, as promised." Amelia accepted the bird with a gracious nod, though she noticed his reluctance to actually hand it to her. "Thank you, Mayor Henderson. It was a fair competition." "Fair indeed," came a deep voice, and suddenly the mountain man was there, having moved through the crowd with surprising quietness for someone his size. Up close, he was even more imposing, but his smile remained friendly. "That was some of the finest shooting I have seen in 15 years of living in these mountains." His voice was rough but educated, with just a hint of an accent she could not quite place. Amelia found herself looking up at him, which was unusual given her own height of 5 feet 8 inches. "Thank you, Mr. Flynn Kincaid," he said, extending a hand that was calloused and scarred from hard work. "Most folks around here just call me the Mountain Man when they are not calling me something less charitable." She took his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, even as he was careful not to squeeze too hard. "Amelia Abbott. And what do you prefer to be called?" "Flynn suits me just fine, Miss Abbott." He released her hand but did not step back. "That was a 200-yard shot with iron sights in a crosswind. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father," Amelia said, warmth flooding her voice at the memory. "He was a marksman in the war. He always said a woman should know how to take care of herself, especially out here." "A wise man," Flynn said. "Is he here today?" The warmth faded from Amelia's expression. "He passed 2 years ago, pneumonia." "I'm sorry for your loss." Flynn's condolences sounded genuine, not like the empty platitudes she had grown accustomed to hearing. "He clearly taught you well." Before Amelia could respond, Mayor Henderson cleared his throat loudly. "Yes, well, congratulations again, Miss Abbott. Now if you will excuse us, we have other matters to attend to." It was a clear dismissal, and Amelia felt her spine stiffen. She had lived in Canon City for 5 years now, ever since her father brought them west seeking drier air for his damaged lungs, but she had never quite been accepted by the town's established families. A woman living alone, running her father's small ranch by herself, shooting better than their menfolk, she was an oddity they tolerated but did not embrace. "Of course," she said coolly, hoisting the turkey over her own shoulder. "Good day, gentlemen." She turned to leave, but Flynn fell into step beside her. "May I walk with you, Miss Abbott?" Amelia glanced at him sidelong. You are not worried about what people will say. You were the only one clapping back there. That cannot have won you any friends." Flynn shrugged his massive shoulders. "I do not come to town often enough to care much about making friends, and when I see something worth applauding, I applaud. Simple as that." Despite herself, Amelia smiled. "Then I would welcome the company, Mr. Kincaid." "Flynn," he corrected gently. "Flynn," she repeated, "and you may call me Amelia." They walked down the main street of Canon City, past the general store and the saloon, past the church with its white-painted steeple and the newly built schoolhouse. The town was growing, fed by silver mining operations in the nearby mountains and the railroad that had arrived 2 years prior. It was still rough around the edges, but it was trying to civilize itself, trying to become respectable. "Do you live far?" Flynn asked. "About 3 miles northeast of town. Small ranch, just 20 acres. I run a few head of cattle, some chickens, a vegetable garden in the warm months." Amelia shifted the turkey to her other shoulder. "It is not much, but it is mine." "That is more than most folks can say," Flynn observed. "You run it yourself?" "I hire help during roundup and branding, and I have a hired hand who comes twice a week to help with the heavier work. But mostly, yes, I manage on my own." Flynn was quiet for a moment, and Amelia could feel him looking at her. "That's impressive. This country is not kind to anyone trying to make it alone, man or woman." "No," Amelia agreed, "it is not. But I have managed so far." They reached the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land dotted with scrub oak and piñon pine. The mountains rose in the distance, already dusted with early snow at their peaks. Amelia's ranch was a small, dark shape on the horizon. "I should let you get home," Flynn said, stopping at the boundary. "But I wonder if I might ask a question." "You may ask. Why did you enter the turkey shoot? You must have known it would cause a stir." Amelia considered the question seriously. "Because I needed the turkey, and I knew I could win it. I will not pretend to be less capable than I am just to make men comfortable." "My father taught me better than that," Flynn's smile returned, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man." "He was." Amelia paused, then added, "Thank you for clapping. It meant something, having at least one person not look at me like I had grown a second head." Anyone with eyes could see that was skilled shooting. They were just too proud to admit they had been beaten. Flynn adjusted his own rifle where it hung across his back. "I live about 10 miles west of here, up in the high country. If you ever need anything help with a difficult task, someone to watch your back, you can find me at the old Walker cabin on Copper Creek." "I will remember that," Amelia said, though she wondered why he was offering. Men did not usually offer help without expecting something in return. As if reading her thoughts, Flynn added, "No strings attached. Just one shooter to another, and one person trying to make a living in this country to another." Amelia studied his face, looking for deception, and finding none. "Then I thank you for the offer, and if you ever need a hand with something, the same applies." Flynn touched the brim of his hat. "I will hold you to that. Good day, Amelia Abbott. Enjoy your turkey." "Good day, Flynn Kincaid." She watched him turn and head back toward town, his long stride eating up the distance. Even from behind, he was impressive, all that muscle and height, moving with a confidence that came from knowing exactly what he was capable of. Amelia shook her head, telling herself not to be foolish. She had learned long ago that depending on others only led to disappointment. But as she walked the remaining 3 miles to her ranch, the turkey growing heavier with each step, she found her thoughts drifting back to storm-gray eyes and calloused hands, to the sound of solitary applause in a silent crowd. The next few weeks passed in their usual rhythm. Amelia woke before dawn each morning to tend her animals, mend fences, split wood, and handle the 1,000 other tasks that came with running a ranch alone. She had hired Tom Brennan, a reliable if not particularly ambitious man in his 50s, to help with the heaviest work, and he came Tuesday and Thursday mornings as promised. But the rest of the time, it was just Amelia and the wind and the vast Colorado sky. She thought about Flynn more than she cared to admit. It was ridiculous, really. They had spoken for all of 20 minutes. But there was something about the way he had looked at her, the genuine respect in his voice when he praised her shooting. Most men either dismissed her capabilities entirely or seemed threatened by them. Flynn had simply acknowledged the truth and moved on. December arrived with bitter cold and the first real snowfall. Amelia spent a full day making sure her small herd was secure, the barn reinforced, and enough hay stored to last through the worst of winter. She was checking the chicken coop one afternoon, wrapping it in extra burlap against the wind, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She straightened, one hand instinctively going to the pistol she wore at her hip these days. A lone rider could mean trouble or simply a traveler seeking shelter, but out here, it paid to be cautious. The rider came into view, and Amelia felt her pulse quicken. Even bundled against the cold, Flynn Kincaid was unmistakable. He sat astride a massive buckskin horse that looked sturdy enough to carry his considerable weight through deep snow. As he drew closer, she could see he had something slung across the back of his saddle. "Amelia," he called out, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Hope I am not intruding." "Flynn." She was pleased at how steady her voice sounded despite the sudden flutter in her chest. "What brings you down from the mountains?" He dismounted with easy grace despite his size, and she could see what he had brought, the carcass of a dressed deer. "Had a successful hunt yesterday and more meat than I can use before it spoils, even in this cold. Thought you might be able to make use of some venison." Amelia eyed the deer, her practical side warring with her pride. Meat was always welcome, especially in winter, but she did not like feeling indebted. "That's generous of you. What do you want in return?" Flynn looked genuinely surprised. "Nothing. I meant what I said before, no strings attached. I have more than I need. You could likely use it. Simple as that." "Nothing is ever that simple." "Maybe it should be." He began untying the deer from his saddle. "Look, if it makes you feel better, you can repay me with a cup of coffee. I have been in the high country for 2 weeks, and my own coffee tastes like creek mud." Amelia found herself smiling despite her reservations. "I can manage that. Bring it to the barn. I have hooks in there for hanging meat." They worked together in comfortable silence, Flynn handling the heavy carcass with ease, while Amelia directed him to the best spot. The barn was dim and cold, but offered shelter from the wind that had begun to pick up outside. Once the deer was secured, they walked to her small cabin. It was not much to look at from the outside, a single-room structure made of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney. But inside, Amelia had made it as comfortable as she could. Colorful quilts made by her mother covered the bed in the corner, bookshelves lined one wall, and a sturdy table with 2 chairs sat near the fireplace. It was clean and orderly, everything in its place. Flynn removed his hat as he entered, ducking slightly to clear the doorframe. "This is nice, cozy. It suits my needs." Amelia stoked the fire back to life and set a pot of coffee to brew. "Sit, please. You must be cold after the ride down." He settled into one of the chairs, which creaked under his weight but held. Amelia was very aware of how much space he took up in her small cabin, how his presence seemed to fill every corner. It was not uncomfortable exactly, but it was intense. "How has the winter been treating you so far?" Flynn asked. "Well enough. The animals are healthy. I have sufficient supplies. As long as the snow does not get too deep before spring, I should be fine." She poured 2 cups of coffee and handed him one. "And you? That cabin you mentioned must get buried up in the high country." "It does," Flynn admitted, wrapping his large hands around the cup. "But I am used to it. I've spent 15 winters up there now. You learn to prepare, and you learn to appreciate the solitude." 15 years, Amelia sat across from him. "That's a long time. Do you never get lonely?" Flynn considered the question. "Sometimes, but I spent enough time around people earlier in my life to know I prefer the company of mountains and trees most days. Present company excluded, of course." "What did you do before? Before the mountains, I mean." He was quiet for a long moment, and Amelia wondered if she had overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice measured. "I was a soldier, fought in the war. Afterward, I tried to go back to my family's farm in Missouri, but I could not settle. Too many ghosts, too many memories, so I came west, kept going until I found a place that felt right." Amelia understood more than he probably realized. "My father was the same way. He could never talk about what he saw, but it haunted him. He said the war took something from every man who fought in it." "That is truth," Flynn agreed quietly. "Some of us just handled it differently. I needed space and silence. Others needed whiskey or violence or religion. None of it really fixes what is broken, but we cope how we can." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the crackling of the fire, and the wind howling outside. It should have been awkward, but somehow it was not. There was an understanding between them, a recognition of shared experience, even if the details differed. "Why did you really bring me the venison?" Amelia asked softly. "And do not say it is because you had extra. You could have given it to anyone in town." Flynn met her eyes, and that intensity was back, the same feeling she had experienced during the turkey shoot. "Because I have been thinking about you since that day. About your shooting, yes, but also about your courage. It takes guts to stand up in front of 40 men and show them what you are made of. I respect that, and I suppose I wanted an excuse to see you again." Amelia's heart hammered in her chest. "You could have just come to visit. You did not need to bring anything." "I am not good at this," Flynn admitted with a rueful smile. "Talking to people, courting, whatever you want to call it. Been too long on the mountain. Bringing meat seemed simpler than figuring out the right words to say." "Courting." Amelia tested the word, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Is that what this is?" "If you are amenable to it. If not, I will finish my coffee, thank you kindly, and ride back to my cabin. No hard feelings." She should say no. She had built a life here based on independence, on not needing anyone. Letting someone in, especially someone like Flynn who stirred feelings she had tried to ignore, was a risk. But as she looked at this mountain of a man sitting awkwardly in her small cabin, being more honest than most people managed in a lifetime, she found she did not want to say no. "I am amenable," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I should warn you, I'm not good at this either. I have never really been courted before." Flynn's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then we will figure it out together. No rush, no pressure. We will just see where it goes." "I would like that." They talked for another hour, conversation flowing more easily now that the truth was out in the open. Flynn told her about his cabin, about tracking elk through deep snow and watching eagles soar over the peaks. Amelia shared stories of learning to shoot with her father, of the challenges of running the ranch alone, of her dreams to maybe expand someday if she could save enough money. When Flynn finally rose to leave, the sun was already setting, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Amelia walked him to his horse, shivering in the cold but reluctant to go back inside. "Thank you for the coffee," Flynn said, swinging up into the saddle with practiced ease. "And for the conversation. Thank you for the venison, and for being honest with me." He looked down at her from his horse, backlit by the fading sun, and Amelia thought she had never seen anything quite so striking. "May I come visit again? Maybe next week if the weather holds." "I would like that very much." Flynn touched his hat brim in farewell, then wheeled his horse around and headed west toward the mountains. Amelia watched until he disappeared from view, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart was still beating faster than normal. She had been alone for so long, had convinced herself she preferred it that way. But standing there in the gathering darkness, she could not deny the warmth that had spread through her during Flynn's visit. Maybe, just maybe, she did not have to be alone anymore. The week that followed was the longest of Amelia's life. She found herself constantly looking toward the western mountains, watching for a rider that did not come. Snow fell twice more, heavy and thick, and she worried that Flynn was snowed in or that he had changed his mind. She told herself it did not matter, that she had managed fine on her own before and could continue doing so. But the disappointment sat heavy in her chest. On the 8th day, just as she was beginning to give up hope, she saw him coming across the white landscape. This time he was on foot, pulling a sled behind him laden with supplies. "The snow is too deep for the horse in some places," he explained as she hurried out to meet him, "but I told you I would come, and I am a man of my word." He had walked 10 miles through deep snow just to visit her. The realization left Amelia speechless for a moment. "You must be frozen," she finally managed. "Come inside, warm up." This visit was easier than the first, the initial awkwardness gone. They fell into conversation naturally while Amelia prepared a simple meal of venison stew and fresh bread. Flynn had brought supplies on his sled: coffee beans, dried fruit, and a thick bearskin that he said was a gift. "For the cabin," he explained. "It will help keep the cold out at night." "Flynn, this is too much. I cannot—" "Yes, you can." His voice was gentle but firm. "Amelia, I am not trying to buy your affection or make you feel indebted. I am simply sharing what I have with someone I care about. That is what people do." Someone I care about. The words settled over her like the bearskin would, warm and protective. That visit set the pattern for the winter. Every week, weather permitting, Flynn would make the journey down from his cabin. Sometimes he brought gifts: furs, meat, fresh trout he had pulled from a stream. Other times, he brought just himself and his easy conversation. He helped her with projects around the ranch, his strength making quick work of tasks that would have taken her days. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their histories and their hopes, learning each other's rhythms and moods. Amelia found herself opening up in ways she never had before. She told Flynn about her mother, who had died when she was 12, about her fear that she was not strong enough to keep the ranch running, about the loneliness that sometimes threatened to swallow her whole. Flynn listened without judgment, offering comfort without trying to fix everything. In turn, he shared pieces of himself he admitted he had never told anyone. The nightmares that still came sometimes, dreams of battles and dying men. The guilt he carried for surviving when so many had not. The fear that he had been alone too long, that he had forgotten how to be around people. "You're doing fine now," Amelia assured him one evening as they sat by the fire. "With me, at least." "That's because you are different," Flynn said. He was sitting on the floor near the fireplace, too large for the small chair, and Amelia had joined him there. They sat close enough that their shoulders touched, a contact that had become familiar over the weeks. "You do not expect me to be anything other than what I am." "Why would I? You have never expected that of me." Flynn turned to look at her, and in the firelight, his eyes were warm. "Amelia, I need you to know what I feel for you is real. This is not just about ending my loneliness or passing the winter. I have fallen in love with you." Her breath caught. She had suspected, had hoped, but hearing the words out loud made it real in a way that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling that day at the turkey shoot, when you were the only one who saw me instead of just a woman doing something unexpected." Flynn reached up, his calloused hand gentle as it cupped her face. "May I kiss you?" Instead of answering, Amelia closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, two people learning each other in a new way. But then Flynn's arm came around her waist, pulling her closer, and Amelia let herself sink into the embrace. He was so warm, so solid, and she felt safe in a way she had not since her father died. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly, ask for your hand the way it should be done. This is the frontier in 1877, not a drawing room in Boston," Amelia said with a soft laugh. "I think we can make our own rules." "Even so," Flynn pulled back enough to look at her seriously. "Amelia Abbott, would you consider marrying me? Not right away, not until you are ready, but someday?" "Yes," Amelia said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Flynn Kincaid." The smile that spread across his face was pure joy, unguarded in a way she had never seen from him. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Amelia felt something in her chest crack open, all the walls she had built to protect herself crumbling away. They stayed up late into the night, making plans and dreaming together. Flynn wanted to combine their properties, to build a larger cabin that could house them both comfortably. Amelia talked about expanding the ranch, maybe breeding horses in addition to cattle. They would keep Flynn's cabin as a hunting shelter for the winters, a place to escape when they needed solitude. But their main home would be here, on Amelia's land, that would become their land. "We should marry in the spring," Flynn suggested. "Give us time to prepare, and to make sure this is truly what you want." "I am sure now," Amelia said. "But spring sounds perfect. April, maybe, when the wildflowers are blooming." "April it is." Flynn stayed that night, though he slept in the barn to preserve Amelia's reputation. It was important to both of them to do things right, especially in a town that already viewed Amelia with suspicion. But they stole a few more kisses before he headed out to the barn, and Amelia went to bed happier than she could ever remember being. The winter continued its slow march toward spring, but now the days seemed brighter, the cold less biting. Flynn came down from the mountains twice a week now, and Amelia began accompanying him on some of his hunting trips, her shooting skills proving useful. They worked side by side cutting timber for their new cabin, planning where each room would go and what furniture they would need. Word spread quickly through Canon City about the impending marriage. Reactions were mixed. Some of the townspeople, particularly the women who had always viewed Amelia as a threat or an oddity, seemed relieved that she would be properly married and therefore less of a concern. Others, especially some of the men Flynn had beaten in the turkey shoot, muttered that it was no surprise the strange woman who shot better than a man would end up with the wild mountain man. But there were kind reactions too. The general store owner, Mr. Patterson, offered them a discount on supplies for the wedding. The preacher, Reverend Walsh, seemed genuinely pleased and offered to perform the ceremony at no charge. And Tom Brennan, Amelia's hired hand, pulled her aside one day to say he was happy for her. "Your father would have approved," Tom said gruffly. "Flynn Kincaid is a good man. Strange, maybe, but solid. He will take care of you." "We will take care of each other," Amelia corrected gently, but she appreciated the sentiment. March arrived with the first hints of thaw, snow melting in patches to reveal the brown earth beneath. Flynn threw himself into building the new cabin with single-minded determination, his powerful frame swinging an axe from dawn until dusk. Amelia helped where she could, notching logs and chinking walls, her own muscles growing stronger from the work. On one afternoon, as they were taking a break and sharing a canteen of water, a rider approached from town. It was young Billy Henderson, the mayor's son, and he looked agitated. "Miss Abbott, Mr. Kincaid," he called out, pulling his horse to a stop. "There is trouble in town. Some miners got into it with a group of cowboys at the saloon. Someone pulled a gun, and now there's shooting. The sheriff is asking for anyone who can handle a weapon to come help restore order." Flynn and Amelia exchanged a glance. "How bad is it?" Flynn asked. "Bad enough. 2 men already wounded, maybe dead, and they are threatening to burn down the saloon." Flynn stood, reaching for his rifle. "I will go." "We will go," Amelia corrected, grabbing her own Winchester. Flynn looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better. "Stay close to me. If bullets start flying, you get behind cover and stay there. Understood?" "Understood. Same goes for you." They rode hard for town, arriving to find Main Street in chaos. The saloon doors were barricaded from the inside, and men were shouting threats from the windows. A small group had gathered across the street, including the sheriff, a nervous-looking man named Briggs who seemed out of his depth. "Kincaid, Miss Abbott," he said with visible relief. "Thank God. We need to get those fools out of there before they burn the whole town down." "What started it?" Flynn asked, his eyes scanning the scene with the practiced assessment of a soldier. "Argument over a card game turned into accusations of cheating, which turned into insults, which turned into drawing weapons. Now the miners have barricaded themselves inside and are saying they will shoot anyone who tries to come in." Flynn thought for a moment. "How many inside?" 5, maybe 6. "And how many wounded?" 2 men shot in the initial exchange. Doc Patterson has them now. Both should live if infection does not set in." Amelia studied the saloon, noting the positions of the windows and the fact that there was a back door that led to an alley. "Flynn, what if I go around back while you and the sheriff talk to them from the front? If they are focused on you, I can slip in the back and get the drop on them." "Absolutely not," Flynn said immediately. "Too dangerous." "More dangerous than a prolonged standoff that ends with the building on fire," Amelia countered. "I am the best shot here, we both know it. And I'm smaller, quieter. I can do this." Sheriff Briggs looked between them uncertainly. "Miss Abbott, I cannot ask you to—" "You are not asking. I am volunteering." Amelia checked her rifle, making sure it was loaded. "Flynn, you know I'm right." Flynn's jaw was tight, every muscle in his body tense with the urge to protect her. But he also knew she was capable, had seen her shoot, trusted her judgment. "If anything happens to you, it will not, but I need you to trust me." He closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "Go. But please, be careful." Amelia circled around through the alley behind the general store, moving quietly despite her pounding heart. She could hear Flynn's voice now, calling out to the men inside, offering to negotiate. Perfect. All their attention would be on the front. The back door of the saloon was unlocked, and Amelia slipped inside. The interior was dim, smelling of spilled whiskey and gun smoke. She could hear the miners at the front, 4 men clustered near the windows with rifles. They were young, probably in their 20s, and looked more scared than dangerous now that the initial adrenaline had worn off. Amelia moved closer, keeping to the shadows. Then, In one smooth motion, she stepped into the open, rifle raised. "Gentlemen," she said calmly, "I'm going to need you to put down your weapons." The miners spun around, and for a moment Amelia thought one of them might actually shoot, but they hesitated, confronted with the unexpected sight of a woman holding a rifle on them with absolute steadiness. "You are that woman who won the turkey shoot," one of them said, recognition dawning. "The one who beat everyone." "I am, and I'm an even better shot now than I was then, so I suggest you do as I say and lower your weapons before anyone else gets hurt." "We did not mean for it to go this far," another miner said, his voice cracking. "He could not have been more than 22. It just all happened so fast. I understand. But barricading yourselves in here and making threats is only going to make things worse. Put down the guns and we can talk about this reasonably." Slowly, one by one, they complied. Amelia kept her rifle steady until all 4 weapons were on the floor. Then she called out to Flynn, "All clear. Coming out." Flynn burst through the front door, the sheriff behind him, both men with weapons drawn. They pulled up short at the sight of Amelia standing calmly in the middle of the saloon, with 4 disarmed miners looking sheepish. "Anyone hurt?" Flynn asked, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Everyone is fine. These gentlemen have agreed to come along peacefully, have you not?" The miners nodded, looking relieved that the situation had been diffused. Sheriff Briggs took them into custody, and the tension that had gripped the town began to ease. People emerged from their hiding places, talking excitedly about what had happened. Flynn waited until they were outside before pulling Amelia into a crushing embrace. "You took 10 years off my life," he said into her hair, "but that was incredibly brave." "It was the smart play," Amelia said, her voice muffled against his chest. "And it worked." "It did." He pulled back enough to look at her, pride and love and lingering fear all warring in his expression. "You are extraordinary, you know that? I had a good teacher and a good partner watching my back." Mayor Henderson approached them, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Miss Abbott, Mr. Kincaid, I want to thank you both. You likely saved lives today and definitely saved property." "Just doing what needed to be done," Flynn said. The mayor cleared his throat. "Yes, well, I also want to apologize. I have not always been welcoming to you, Miss Abbott, and that was wrong of me. You have proven yourself a valuable member of this community time and again. I hope you will both accept my best wishes for your upcoming marriage." It was as close to a genuine apology as the mayor was likely to get, and Amelia accepted it graciously. "Thank you, Mayor Henderson. That means a great deal." As they rode back to the ranch, Amelia felt something shift in her relationship with the town. She would never be conventional, and there would always be those who disapproved of a woman who shot and rode and ran her own ranch. But she had proven herself today in a way that even the most skeptical could not dismiss. "1 month until the wedding," Flynn said as they unsaddled the horses. "Are you getting nervous?" "Not about marrying you," Amelia said, "but about the ceremony itself, maybe a little. I have never been comfortable being the center of attention." "We will keep it simple then. Just the preacher, a few witnesses, and each other. That is all that matters." "That sounds perfect." April arrived in a riot of wildflowers, just as Amelia had hoped. The new cabin was nearly finished, a sturdy 2-room structure with a proper loft and a stone fireplace large enough to heat the whole space. It sat on a small rise overlooking Amelia's original cabin, which they planned to convert into a storage building. The day before the wedding, Amelia woke to find Flynn already gone. He had left a note saying he had something to take care of and would return by evening. True to his word, he arrived just as the sun was setting, leading his buckskin horse, which was laden with packages. "What is all this?" Amelia asked, coming out to meet him. "Wedding gifts. I rode into town this morning to pick up a few things." He began unloading the packages, and Amelia saw fabric, a new set of dishes, and a beautiful quilt made in a wedding ring pattern. "Flynn, you should not have spent so much." "Hush. I've been saving my trapping money for 15 years with nothing to spend it on. Let me do this." There was one more package, smaller and wrapped carefully. Flynn handed it to her. "This one you should open now." Inside was a dress, the most beautiful dress Amelia had ever owned. It was a deep green color that would bring out her eyes, made of soft wool with delicate ivory lace at the collar and cuffs. It was practical enough for frontier life, but special enough for a wedding. "Flynn," she breathed, "it is beautiful." I described you to the dressmaker and told her to make something worthy of you. I hope it fits." Amelia held the dress up to herself, tears prickling her eyes. "It is perfect. You are perfect." He pulled her close, and they stood there in the fading light, holding each other and marveling at how far they had come from that day at the turkey shoot. The wedding took place the next afternoon in the small church at the edge of town. True to their wishes, it was simple. Tom Brennan stood up as Flynn's witness, and Mrs. Patterson from the general store agreed to stand up for Amelia. A handful of townspeople gathered to watch, more than Amelia had expected given her complicated relationship with Canon City. She wore the green dress Flynn had bought her, with wildflowers in her auburn hair. Flynn wore his best clothes, his dark hair neatly trimmed for the occasion, though still long enough to brush his collar. He looked impossibly handsome and impossibly nervous, which Amelia found endearing. Reverend Walsh kept the ceremony short, for which they were both grateful. When it came time for the vows, Flynn took both of Amelia's hands in his and spoke in a voice that was low but steady. "Amelia, I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you or behind you, but beside you as an equal partner. I promise to respect your strength and support you in your weakness. I promise to love you through all the days of my life, whether they are easy or hard, joyful or sorrowful. You have my heart, my loyalty, and my devotion, now and always." Amelia had to blink back tears before she could speak her own vows. "Flynn, I promise to trust you with my fears and share with you my joys. I promise to be honest with you always, even when the truth is difficult. I promise to build a life with you based on respect, partnership, and love. You have given me a gift I never thought I would have, a true companion. I will treasure that gift every day of our lives together." "By the power vested in me," Reverend Walsh said with a warm smile, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Flynn cupped Amelia's face in his large hands and kissed her gently, sweetly, a promise of all the kisses to come. The small congregation applauded, and for a moment Amelia was transported back to that November day, to the sound of Flynn's solitary applause in a silent crowd. He had been the first person to see her truly, and now he was her husband. They held a small reception at the new cabin, with food provided by neighbors and well-wishers. It was not elaborate, but it was genuine, and Amelia found herself enjoying the celebration more than she had anticipated. Even Mayor Henderson attended, bringing a bottle of good whiskey as a gift. As the sun began to set and the guests departed, Flynn and Amelia finally found themselves alone in their new home. Flynn built up the fire, while Amelia stood at the window, looking out at the land that was now truly theirs together. "What are you thinking?" Flynn asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "That I'm happy," Amelia said simply. "Truly, completely happy. I did not think that was possible anymore after my father died." "I know the feeling." Flynn rested his chin on top of her head. "I spent 15 years on that mountain, thinking I was content with solitude. I was wrong. I was just waiting for the right person to share my life with." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Later, they would consummate their marriage, learning each other's bodies with the same patience and care they had used to learn each other's hearts. But for now, this was enough: the warmth of the fire, the shelter of the cabin they had built together, and the simple joy of not being alone anymore. The first year of marriage brought adjustments, as any marriage does. Flynn was used to complete solitude in his own schedule, while Amelia was used to running her ranch exactly as she saw fit. But they approached their conflicts with the same honesty they had brought to their courtship, talking through disagreements instead of letting resentment fester. Flynn's strength proved invaluable around the ranch. Tasks that had taken Amelia days to complete alone were finished in hours with his help. They expanded the cattle herd, adding 10 more head that spring. Flynn also began trapping again in the winter months, bringing in additional income from furs. But it was not all work. Flynn taught Amelia to track animals through the forest, skills he had honed over his years in the mountains. Amelia taught Flynn to read the more complex books she owned, discovering that while he could read basic text, he had never learned to parse dense philosophical or literary works. They spent their evenings reading aloud to each other, discussing ideas and stories by firelight. The town's attitude toward them gradually shifted from suspicion to acceptance. It helped that Flynn and Amelia proved themselves useful. Time and again, Flynn with his strength and tracking skills when someone went missing in the mountains, Amelia with her marksmanship when predators threatened livestock. They became known as a formidable team, and while some still thought them odd, few questioned their value to the community. In the spring of 1878, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. The realization came with a mix of joy and terror. She had always wanted children, but she worried about how a baby would change their life, whether she would be a good mother, whether the birth itself would go well so far from proper medical care. Flynn's reaction when she told him was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit up with unguarded happiness, and he picked her up, spinning her around before carefully setting her back down as if she might break. Sorry, he said, suddenly anxious. Should I not have done that? I do not want to hurt you or the baby. Amelia laughed, the sound bright with relief at his joy. I am pregnant, not made of glass, but maybe save the spinning for after the baby is born. Flynn became almost comically protective as her pregnancy progressed. He did not want her lifting anything heavy or riding her horse or doing any of the dozen tasks she had always handled. It led to their first real fight, with Amelia insisting she was perfectly capable and Flynn arguing that he could not lose her, that he would die if something happened to her or the baby. Then trust me, Amelia said, taking his face in her hands. Trust me to know my own limits and to ask for help when I need it. I am not fragile, Flynn. Carrying a child does not change that. I know, he said quietly. I am just scared. I've lost so many people in my life. The thought of losing you. You will not lose me. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, and I am strong and healthy. We will get through this together. And they did. When her time came in January of 1879, it was Mrs. Patterson who served as midwife, having attended dozens of births over her years in Canon City. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Flynn paced outside the cabin, wild-eyed with fear at Amelia's cries of pain. But when Mrs. Patterson finally emerged with a squalling baby wrapped in blankets, Flynn's fear transformed into wonder. You have a son, Mrs. Patterson said, handing the baby to Flynn with a smile. Strong and healthy, just like his parents. Flynn looked down at the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair, the perfect miniature fingers. Can I see Amelia? She is resting, but yes, she wants you. Amelia was pale and exhausted, but her eyes shone when Flynn entered with their son. Look what we made, she said softly. Flynn sat carefully on the edge of the bed, placing the baby in Amelia's arms. He is perfect. You are perfect. I've never been so proud or so terrified in my entire life. I know the feeling. Amelia studied their son's face, memorizing every detail. What should we name him? They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, holding their child, the answer seemed obvious. James, Flynn said. After your father, he would have loved to meet his grandson. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. James Kincaid. Yes, that is perfect. Young James proved to be a healthy, happy baby who grew rapidly under his parents' devoted care. Flynn was a natural father despite his fears, patient and gentle with the boy. He fashioned a cradle from pine wood, sanded until it was smooth as silk, and would spend hours rocking James while singing old songs he remembered from his own childhood. Amelia marveled at the transformation in their lives. 2 years ago she had been alone, convinced she would spend her life that way. Now she had a husband who loved her completely, and a beautiful son who looked up at her with eyes that were already turning the same storm gray as his father's. They settled into a new rhythm, adjusting their work around the baby's needs. Tom Brennan came more frequently now, happy to help with the ranch work while Flynn and Amelia focused on their son. The cabin that had seemed so spacious for two now felt full in the best possible way, filled with the sounds of a baby's laughter and cries. When James was 6 months old, they took him to town for the first time. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Even the women who had once viewed Amelia with suspicion cooed over the baby, offering advice and hand-me-down clothes. It was as if having a child had finally made Amelia respectable in their eyes, though she found this vaguely amusing given that nothing else about her had changed. "You are still thinking too much," Flynn said as they rode home, James sleeping peacefully in a sling against Amelia's chest. "Just accept that people like babies and leave it at that." "I suppose you are right," Amelia agreed, "though it is strange to finally be accepted for the most conventional thing I have ever done." "There is nothing conventional about you, and thank God for that. I would not change a single thing." The years passed in a blur of work and love and small moments of joy. James grew into a sturdy toddler, then a bright boy who showed his mother's keen mind and his father's physical strength. They taught him to ride and shoot and read, to be kind and honest and brave. In 1881, Amelia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with excitement rather than fear, as they both knew what to expect. Their daughter, Sarah, was born that December, coming into the world with her mother's auburn hair and a cry that Flynn swore could be heard all the way to the peaks. With 2 children, the original cabin that they had converted to storage was renovated into a small schoolhouse where Amelia taught James and Sarah their letters and numbers. Flynn added another room to the main house, giving each child their own small space as they grew. The ranch prospered under their joint management. They now ran 30 head of cattle and had begun breeding horses, which proved lucrative as more settlers arrived in the area needing reliable mounts. Flynn's trapping continued to bring in steady income, and Amelia's shooting skills meant they never wanted for meat. But more than the material success, it was the life they had built together that mattered. Every morning, Flynn would wake before dawn and watch Amelia sleep for a few moments, still marveling that she was his. Every evening, Amelia would watch Flynn play with their children and feel a surge of love so strong it almost hurt. They had their challenges, of course. There was the winter of 1883, when the snow was so deep they were trapped in the house for 2 weeks, nerves fraying from close quarters. There was the summer when a wildfire threatened their land, and they spent 3 terrifying days fighting to save their home. There was Flynn's occasional nightmares from the war and Amelia's moments of grief for her father that would strike without warning. But they weathered each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. They learned to read each other's moods, to know when to push and when to give space, to balance independence with interdependence. In 1885, when James was 6 and Sarah was 4, the family took a trip to Denver. It was the farthest any of them had traveled, and the city seemed impossibly large and loud after the quiet of their ranch. But Flynn wanted to take Amelia to a proper restaurant, to buy her a dress that was not practical but beautiful, to show her some of the world beyond the mountains. They stayed in a hotel with actual wallpaper and a dining room with crystal chandeliers. Amelia wore a blue silk dress that Flynn had insisted on buying, and he wore a proper suit that made him look oddly civilized until you looked at his calloused hands and weathered face. "We look like we are playing dress-up," Amelia whispered as they entered the restaurant, very aware of the other diners staring at them. "We look like a beautiful woman and her devoted husband out for a nice dinner," Flynn corrected. "Hold your head up, Amelia. You belong anywhere you choose to be." They ordered food they could not pronounce and drank wine from actual crystal glasses. The children were being watched by the hotel's nanny service, leaving Flynn and Amelia alone together for the first time in months. "I am glad we came," Amelia said, reaching across the table to take Flynn's hand, "but I will also be glad to go home." "Me too. This is nice, but it's not us." "No, it's not. We are mountain people through and through now." Flynn raised his wine glass. "To mountain people, and to the woman who won the turkey shoot in my heart." Amelia clinked her glass against his, smiling at the memory of that November day so long ago. And to the man who was the only one still clapping. They returned to Canon City and their ranch, settling back into their life with relief. The trip had been wonderful, but Flynn was right. The fancy restaurants and hotels were not who they were. They belonged to the land, to the mountains, to the life they had carved out through hard work and determination. As their children grew, Flynn and Amelia made sure to teach them not just practical skills, but also the values they held dear. They taught them to treat everyone with respect regardless of gender or background, to value hard work and honesty, to stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. James, at 8 years old, already showed promise as a marksman. Flynn would take him hunting in the mountains, teaching him to track and move quietly through the forest. Sarah, at 6, preferred helping her mother with the horses, showing an intuitive understanding of the animals that delighted Amelia. One evening in the summer of 1887, the family sat outside watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. James and Sarah were catching fireflies in jars, their laughter ringing through the warm air. Flynn had his arm around Amelia's shoulders, and she leaned into his solid warmth. "Do you ever think about that day?" Amelia asked quietly. "The turkey shoot." "All the time," Flynn admitted. "It changed my entire life. If I'd not gone to town that day, if I'd not seen you shoot, if I'd not been brave enough to approach you afterward, we might never have met." "I think we would have found each other somehow," Amelia said. "Some things are meant to be." "Maybe. But I am grateful it happened the way it did. I got to see you in your element, doing what you do best before I even knew your name. I fell in love with your courage before I fell in love with your face." Amelia turned to kiss him, a soft press of lips that still sent warmth through her chest, even after all these years. "I love you, Flynn Kincaid, more today than yesterday, and less than I will tomorrow." "That is beautiful. Did you read that somewhere?" "No, I just thought of it. But it is true." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play and the stars emerge overhead. This was what happiness looked like, Amelia thought. Not grand gestures or exciting adventures, but quiet moments with the people you loved in the place you belonged. The years continued to roll by, bringing changes both small and large. Canon City grew from a rough frontier town into a proper community with a school, a library, and even a small hospital. The railroad expanded, bringing more people and more commerce. The Wild West was slowly being tamed, civilization creeping in from all sides. But up at the Kincaid Ranch, life remained largely unchanged. They still worked the land, still hunted and trapped, still measured their wealth in strong bodies and full bellies rather than bank accounts. They were not rich by any conventional measure, but they had everything they needed and more. In 1890, Flynn's nightmares returned with a vengeance. It had been years since the last episode, but something triggered the memories of a thunderstorm that sounded too much like cannon fire, or perhaps just the accumulation of time and suppressed trauma. He woke screaming, thrashing, lost in the hell of battles fought decades ago. Amelia held him through it, her calm voice anchoring him to the present. "You are safe. You are home. The war is over. I am here." It took several minutes for Flynn to come back to himself, his breathing ragged and his body drenched in sweat. "I'm sorry," he gasped. "I thought I was past this." "Trauma does not work that way," Amelia said gently. "It comes and goes, but you are not alone in this. Whatever you need, I am here." They spent the rest of the night talking, Flynn finally opening up about some of the specific horrors he had witnessed during the war. It was painful, but it was also healing, this sharing of the darkest parts of himself with someone who would not turn away. In the morning, Amelia suggested they ride up to Flynn's old cabin in the high country, just the two of them. Tom Brennan could watch the children for a few days. Flynn needed the mountains, needed the peace and perspective that only altitude could bring. They spent 3 days in the cabin where Flynn had lived alone for so many years. They hiked through alpine meadows thick with wildflowers, fished in crystal-clear streams, made love in the big bed Flynn had built with his own hands, and slowly Flynn found his equilibrium again, the nightmares receding as he reconnected with the land that had always been his refuge. "Thank you," he said on their last morning in the cabin, "for knowing what I needed even when I did not." "We take care of each other," Amelia said simply. "That is what we have always done." They rode back down the mountain hand in hand, ready to return to their life and their children. The nightmares might come again, but Flynn knew now that he could survive them, that he did not have to face his demons alone. James and Sarah continued to grow, becoming capable young people who made their parents proud. James, at 12, could handle a rifle almost as well as his mother and showed his father's quiet strength. Sarah, at 10, could outride anyone in the county and had inherited her mother's stubborn independence. In 1892, word came that the government was offering homestead grants for additional land in the area. Flynn and Amelia filed a claim, expanding their ranch to include the meadow where Flynn had proposed all those years ago. It felt right, bringing that place officially into their family holdings. They celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them riding out to that same meadow. It was April, and the wildflowers were in full bloom just as they had been on their wedding day. 15 years, Amelia marveled. It has gone so fast. And yet I can barely remember what life was like before you, Flynn said. It all seems gray and empty in comparison. I know what you mean. You brought color to my world, Flynn. You and our children and this life we have built. They spread a blanket on the ground and lay side by side, looking up at the endless blue sky. At 42, Flynn's hair was beginning to show threads of silver, and Amelia, at 38, had laugh lines around her eyes that had not been there when they met. But they were both still strong, still capable, still deeply in love. What do you think the future holds? Amelia asked. More of this, I hope, Flynn said. Watching our children grow, working the land, growing old together, maybe grandchildren someday, though I am in no rush for that. Neither am I, Amelia laughed. Let James and Sarah be children a while longer. Whatever comes, we will face it together. That is all I need to know. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Flynn pulled Amelia close. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt a profound sense of peace. This was what she had fought for, not just the land or the ranch or even the marriage itself, but this feeling of belonging, of being exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the right person. The turn of the century brought both excitement and trepidation. The year 1900 seemed impossibly futuristic, a marker of how much the world had changed since Amelia and Flynn first met. Canon City now had electric lights on its main street, and there was talk of telephone lines being installed. The Old West was fading into memory, replaced by something more modern and civilized. But some things remained constant. The mountains still rose majestically to the west, snow-capped and eternal. The land still demanded hard work and respect, and the love between Amelia and Flynn still burned as bright as it had that first winter when they sat by her fireplace and admitted their feelings. James, now 18, had grown into a fine young man who stood almost as tall as his father, with the same broad shoulders and quiet strength. He was courting a girl from town, a sweet-natured young woman named Elizabeth, who seemed to genuinely care for him. Flynn and Amelia approved, seeing in their son's courtship echoes of their own early days. Sarah, at 16, showed no interest in courtship, much to the frustration of several young men in the area. She was more concerned with breeding the fastest horses in Colorado and had already earned a reputation as an excellent trainer. She had her mother's skill with a rifle and her father's fearlessness, a combination that made her formidable. One evening in May of 1901, the family gathered for dinner as they did every night. James had brought Elizabeth with him, and the young woman was helping Sarah set the table while Flynn and Amelia prepared the food. "I want to ask you something," James said as they sat down to eat. Flynn and Amelia exchanged a knowing glance. "Go ahead, son." "I want to marry Elizabeth, with your blessing, of course." James took Elizabeth's hand, and the young woman blushed but looked happy. "I know I am young, but I love her, and I want to start building a life together." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. Her baby boy was all grown up, ready to start his own family. "Elizabeth, do you love our son?" "With all my heart, Mrs. Kincaid," Elizabeth said earnestly. "Then you have our blessing," Flynn said, his voice thick with emotion. "Both of you. We will help you build a cabin on the east 40 acres if you like, keep you close, but give you your own space." The joy on James's face was worth any sadness Amelia might feel about her son growing up. This was the natural order of things, the next generation beginning their own stories. Sarah raised her glass. "To James and Elizabeth, may your marriage be as strong and loving as our parents." They clinked glasses, and Amelia reached under the table to squeeze Flynn's hand. He squeezed back, both of them silently acknowledging what a blessing it was to have raised such good children, to have built something that would outlast them. James and Elizabeth married that September in the same church where Flynn and Amelia had wed 23 years earlier. It was a larger affair than Flynn and Amelia's simple ceremony, with half the town in attendance. But the vows were just as heartfelt, and when James kissed his bride, Amelia saw the same wonder in his eyes that Flynn had shown all those years ago. True to his word, Flynn helped James build a sturdy cabin on the east section of their land. The young couple moved in that winter, and by spring, Elizabeth was pregnant with their first child. Amelia was going to be a grandmother at 47, a thought that filled her with equal parts joy and disbelief. The first grandchild, a girl they named Emma, was born in December of 1902. Amelia assisted with the birth, passing on the knowledge and experience she had gained from her own pregnancies. When she placed the squalling baby in Elizabeth's arms, she felt the circle of life complete itself in a profound way. Flynn was an enthusiastic grandfather, carving toys for little Emma and spoiling her shamelessly. Amelia teased him about it, but she was just as bad, knitting blankets and small clothes, holding the baby whenever she could. Sarah, watching her parents and brother embrace this new chapter, felt restless. She loved her family, but she did not see herself following the same path. She had no interest in marriage or babies, at least not yet. What she wanted was to travel, to see more of the world beyond Canon City and the mountains. "I am thinking of going to Denver," she told her parents one evening, "maybe even further. There's a woman there who breeds thoroughbreds, and she is looking for an apprentice." Amelia's first instinct was to say no, to keep her daughter safe at home. But she remembered her own fierce independence at that age, her refusal to be constrained by others' expectations. "How long would you be gone?" she asked. "A year? Maybe 2. I would come home to visit, of course. But I need to do this, Mama. I need to see what else is out there." Flynn looked at Amelia, and they had one of their wordless conversations, years of marriage allowing them to communicate volumes with just a glance. "If this is what you need, then you have our support," Flynn finally said. "But you write to us every week, and if you ever need anything, you come home, no matter what." Sarah threw her arms around both her parents. "Thank you. I promise I will be careful." She left in March of 1903, and the house felt oddly empty without her energy and laughter. But Amelia and Flynn had each other, and they had James and Elizabeth and little Emma nearby. They were entering a new phase of life, one that involved passing the torch to the next generation. Flynn was 55 now, his hair more silver than dark, his face deeply lined from years of sun and wind. But he was still strong, still capable of a full day's work on the ranch. Amelia, at 50, moved with the same confidence she always had, though her auburn hair was now streaked with gray, and her hands showed the wear of decades of hard labor. They spent more time together now that both children were grown, rediscovering the quiet intimacy of their early marriage. They would ride up to the high country cabin for a week at a time, just the two of them and the mountains. They made love in the afternoons, unhurried and tender, their bodies familiar and beloved after 25 years together. "I never get tired of this," Flynn said one evening, as they lay tangled in each other's arms. "Of you, of us, of this life." "Neither do I," Amelia agreed, "though if you had told me when I was 25 and alone that this was possible, I would not have believed you. I'm glad you took a chance on a mountain man with more muscles than social graces." Amelia laughed. "You had plenty of both. You just did not know it." Letters arrived regularly from Sarah, full of stories about her work with the horses and her life in Denver. She sounded happy and fulfilled, which eased Amelia's worry about her daughter being so far away. In 1904, James and Elizabeth had their second child, a boy they named Thomas after Tom Brennan, who had finally retired from ranch work at the age of 78. The old man was touched beyond words, and he held his namesake with tears streaming down his weathered face. "Never thought I would live to see something like this," Tom said gruffly, "being honored this way." "You've been part of this family since the beginning," Amelia said, squeezing his shoulder. "It is only right." The ranch now spanned over 200 acres, a far cry from the small 20-acre plot Amelia had started with. Between James running his section and Flynn and Amelia managing theirs, they were one of the most successful operations in the area. But success was not measured in acres or cattle for them. It was measured in family dinners and children's laughter and the deep satisfaction of work well done. Sarah returned home in the summer of 1905, bringing with her a string of beautiful horses she had bred and a confidence that came from proving herself in the wider world. But she also brought a surprise, a young man named Daniel, who worked as a veterinarian and clearly adored her. "This is Daniel Morrison," Sarah said, her face flushed with happiness. "We have been courting for 6 months, and I wanted you to meet him." Daniel was a good man, educated but practical, respectful of Sarah's fierce independence while clearly strong enough to stand beside her as an equal. Flynn and Amelia liked him immediately. "Do you love our daughter?" Flynn asked bluntly over dinner that first night. "I do, sir. More than I thought possible. She is the most remarkable woman I have ever met." "Good answer," Amelia said with a smile. "But Sarah, what about your work with the horses?" "Daniel wants to set up a practice here in Canon City. We could work together in treating the animals, me training them. We have been planning it for months." Sarah reached for Daniel's hand. "I saw the world, Mama, but I realized that home is where I want to be, just like you always said." They married that fall, and Daniel proved to be a wonderful addition to the family. He and Flynn would spend hours discussing animal husbandry and veterinary care, while he and Amelia bonded over their shared love of books. He treated Sarah with the respect and partnership that she demanded, never trying to diminish her or control her. By 1907, Flynn and Amelia were grandparents to 4 children. James and Elizabeth had added another daughter to their family, and Sarah had given birth to twin boys who kept everyone on their toes. The ranch house was frequently full of children's voices, and Flynn built a long table that could seat the entire extended family for Sunday dinners. "This is what I always dreamed of," Amelia said one Sunday as she watched her children and grandchildren interact. "Family, love, continuity." "You built it," Flynn said, coming to stand behind her and wrap his arms around her waist, "through your strength and courage and refusal to accept limitations." "We built it," Amelia corrected, "together." Flynn turned her in his arms and kissed her, not caring that their children might see. After 30 years of marriage, public displays of affection no longer embarrassed either of them. "I love you, Amelia Kincaid. More today than the day I married you, which I would not have thought possible. I love you too, Flynn. Always and forever." As they stood there, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built, Amelia thought back to that November day in 1876. She had won a turkey shoot against 40 men, and one mountain man had been the only person clapping. That single moment had set everything else in motion: the courtship, the marriage, the children, the grandchildren, the ranch. All of it. She had taken a chance on love when it would have been easier to stay alone and protected. Flynn had come down from his mountain and taken the same chance. And together they had created something beautiful and lasting, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. The years grew shorter and more precious as Flynn and Amelia entered their 60s. They gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to James and Sarah, though both still worked as much as their aging bodies would allow. They spent their time with grandchildren, passing on stories and skills, making sure the next generation knew where they came from. In 1915, as the world plunged into a terrible war overseas, Flynn and Amelia celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary. They rode out to their meadow one last time, both of them moving slower than they once had, but still determined. 37 years, Flynn marveled. Where did the time go? "Into every moment we have shared," Amelia said. "Every kiss, every conversation, every challenge we faced together. Time well spent." They sat on the same blanket they had used decades before, now worn and patched but still serviceable. The wildflowers bloomed around them in profusion, nature's constant renewal giving promise that life would continue even after they were gone. "I have no regrets," Flynn said suddenly. "Everything I have done, every choice I made, led me to you. And that makes it all worthwhile." "No regrets here either," Amelia agreed. "Though if I could do it again, I might have shot you instead of those bottles at the turkey shoot just to get your attention faster." Flynn laughed, the sound as warm and genuine as it had been 37 years ago. "You had my attention from the first shot. I was just working up the courage to talk to you." They talked until the sun began to set, reminiscing about their years together, the good and the bad, the joys and the sorrows. And as the last light faded from the sky, they headed home together, hand in hand, still partners after all these years. Flynn Kincaid lived to the age of 73, passing peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1921 with Amelia holding his hand. His last words were, "I love you," whispered to the woman who had shared his life for 43 years. Amelia grieved deeply, but not bitterly. She had been blessed with a love most people only dreamed of, a partnership that had sustained her through 4 decades. She lived another 8 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all carried pieces of the life she and Flynn had built. When Amelia Abbott Kincaid died in 1929 at the age of 75, she was buried next to Flynn on a hill overlooking the ranch they had created together. The headstone was simple. Together, they built a legacy of love. And indeed, they had. Their children continued the ranch, passing it down through generations. The story of the woman who won the turkey shoot and the mountain man who was the only one clapping became family legend, told and retold until it took on the patina of myth. But at its heart, it was a simple story. 2 people, both alone and independent, both scarred by life in different ways, chose to take a chance on each other. They built a life based on respect, partnership, and deep abiding love. They raised good children, worked hard, and faced every challenge side by side. In the end, that was their greatest victory, not the land they acquired or the success of their ranch, but the love they shared and passed on to future generations. It was a love that started with solitary applause in a silent crowd and grew into something that would echo through the ages, a testament to the power of seeing someone truly and choosing to stand beside them no matter what came. The meadow where Flynn proposed still blooms with wildflowers every spring, and the cabin they built together still stands, maintained by descendants who understand that they are the inheritors of something precious. The turkey shoot that started it all became an annual tradition in Canon City, with prizes given in honor of Amelia and Flynn's memory. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blows down from the mountains, you can almost hear the echo of hands clapping, a solitary sound that changed 2 lives and created a legacy that would last forever.